Welcome in, race fans, to this edition of Through the Gears presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino Pattigno, and I couldn't be more excited to get back into the NASCAR racing and betting action as we head to the Windy City, Chicago, for the NASCAR Chicago Street Race. I am so excited for this weekend's really special event that this race has become, and I was there at the race last year, taking it all in person, talking to the drivers, talking to fans, and really being immersed in everything that was going on there in the Chicago area. It was such a great experience, and that was even with some rain that put a little bit of a damper on the weekend. So I'm not sure what the exact forecast is for this weekend, but rain or shine, I know it's going to be a spectacular event and a very awesome race as well. So I'm really excited to talk about the Chicago Street Race, preview some best bets and, strategies we can use with it being the only street race. And the second time we'll be there now ever for this NASCAR racing action this weekend. But before I do that, and before we go through the gears, I got to give a special shout out to Sandman6298 who commented on the last video. I gave him some tips there. He had a couple questions about the Xfinity Series and trucks, and one of the guys I mentioned, Raja Karuth, for a top 3 finish. He had it up until the very last lap, and he finished 4th. Another one was Chandler Smith, who looked good, and John Hunter Nemechek, who ended up winning the Xfinity Series race at Nashville last weekend. So hopefully, you guys were able to cash on that. Kyle B8 commented that unfortunately he didn't get to see the race last weekend, but Kyle Busch himself did DNF once again. Hey, my man, it's been a tough season for Kyle Busch, as we've noted, but he's close. Like, he's there. He is in position to turn things around, and every week, it just seems like something happens out of his control that makes them finish outside of the top 10 or not finish at all in that case at Nashville. We'll break that down a little bit more in the Nashville recap. Also got to shout out Donald Veal, 8135, and Ben Scoville for commenting on last week's video. Appreciate you guys there. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and let me know if you have any questions as we head into this week's race from Chicago. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. Where do we even start with this one? It's the Nashville recap, and that was one of the craziest races I have ever seen in my entire NASCAR fandom career. I mean, in being a consumer of the sport, we have overtime finishes and, maybe 1 or 2 double overtime, triple overtime, 5 overtimes, a new record, most in NASCAR history since overtime was invented. And to me, that's okay. I see people talking about it and everything like that. More overtimes is okay because of how it happened. Look, this is the best of the best. This is the NASCAR Cup Series. It's not like they were wrecking each other right before the start-finish line every restart just because people wanted to be super aggressive. People were running out of gas. People were using strategy to try to stay up front, to manage their fuel, to manage their tires that were there, what they had left, just to try to put themselves in position to win. And maybe 2 or 3 were, crashes coming into the turns or out of the turns and stuff like that. But a lot of them was Kyle Larson running out of gas, Chase Elliott runs out of gas, and etc. More drivers, the same exact thing was happening until no one had any gas or they had to come down and pit. So to me, that's something where it's an anomaly. It's a one-off. That was a crazy thing that we have never really seen before, especially at Nashville. There was no overtime finishes in Nashville the past 3 times we raced there, and now here you go. My biggest thing with this one was Ford won the race. If you tuned into the show last week, I talked about how I was not on Ford. No Fords finished inside the top 10 in this race last year at Nashville. And so to me, I wasn't on the Fords. I was on the Toyotas heavy, Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Mark Truex Jr., throwing a couple Chevys, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott. Well, if you listen to any of those names I just mentioned, they were right there. Denny Hamlin, first of all, should have won the race. Denny Hamlin, had the caution not come out, with 1 lap to go, Denny Hamlin wins the race, and we get back-to-back victories, and we're sitting on some profit here. Now, that's fine. Overtimes happen. It is what it is in all sports. And that's why I'm okay with a lot of overtimes in this one, because it's exciting, and it's what the consumer wants to see. Yes, the race could end under yellow for the scheduled distance, but that's not what I want. I want the excitingness, and I want the action, and I want overtime. I love overtime in any sort of sport. So, okay, we get overtime. Denny Hamlin's still leading. Looks like he should have won, at least one of the overtimes had they get to the checkered flag there. Denny Hamlin looked like the car to beat. And in the end, Joey Logano gets the victory. But how did Joey do that? Well, he was able to manage, and save the most fuel out of anyone out of the entire field. But the reason why, or the reason how that happened, was Chris Gabehart, Denny Hamlin's crew chief, said was because he was slow. And to put that in perspective, when the yellow came out with 2 to go for the first time, Joey Logano was in 14th. Zane Smith, who finished second, 24th. Ryan Preece, 25th. Ryan Blaney, 32nd and a lap down. They finished first, second, fourth, and sixth. That's crazy. So to me, that's just sort of how it happened. Tough one in terms of profit. Tyler Reddick top 5 hit there. But realistically, it could have been a better day. I mean, Tyler Reddick's value went from 13-1 to 17-1. I doubled down on him there, trying to get it to see him in victory lane, as he looked like they made better adjustments in the first half than they did in the second half. But he was still a car that was there at the end, ended up finishing third, which hurt because he was pretty close to getting that victory there. But ultimately, not a bad weekend considering everything that had happened there, and with a tremendous unit swing in terms of having 3 out of our 4 picks inside the top 3. Let's move on from that now. Let's look ahead. Let's get back into victory lane. Make some money this weekend, and no better place to do it than the Chicago street race. Right now, what I'm wearing is some Chicago merch from the last race that was there. I picked this up at the track and thought it was pretty fire. I mean, looking like Chicago Bulls right now and Michael Jordan and everything like that. So I'm repping it here for this show here just to bring the most good juju we can possibly get heading into this one and really feeling a part of the Chicago street race once again this time around. Now, for some betting strategies and a little bit of prep that we can do, I do have a speed chart of the best total speed ranking since 2023 from Ryan at iFantasy Race. Go check him out if you haven't already. I reference him and the guys over at Win the Race as to really help provide me with some additional data that I can look at and sort of reference to when I need to in terms of the speed rankings that we'll be looking for, and to see really who's fast and who's been fast at these road courses. Now, aside from that, and looking back at the race from last year, which was a little bit different in the first half considering they were on wet weather tires and it was raining a little bit there, or at least the track was soaked for a large portion of the beginning of that race. For this one, I think it's important to note just how unique this racetrack is and who has been strong on road courses this season, and I think that'll sort of contribute and play a factor into who's going to be strong on the street race in Chicago. Your top 5 drivers in terms of total speed ranking at the Chicago street race in 2023. Number 1, Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG dominated this race in the second half when it really mattered most. To me, I only see him getting better and it really becoming a part of the NASCAR world. He's been racing in the Xfinity Series. He already has 2 victories thus far this year. Could have been more due to the road courses they raced on, and he's just been learning the cars more and more. So to me, I think SVG is going to come back and be even more dominant than he was then. What's important to note too is some of these drivers that are regulars in the NASCAR Cup Series, they've now had more experience had that experience rather at the Chicago street race last year to base some data off of and to really have just a feel for the track itself. That was the first time NASCAR's ever run on a street course. So obviously, they'd be a little timid or they'd be a little unsure of some of the corners and some of the speed where they could find it and everything like that. So to me, that makes sense. But SVG went all out. He was aggressive. Another driver, too, was Tyler Reddick that I thought of, and I heard in Denny Hamlin's podcast this past week, Actions Detrimental. He talked about how he just wanted to go full send and see what he can learn. I think that's going to play a factor now going back to that track this year and knowing, okay, this is where I can maximize speed here. In this corner, this is where I can catch up to the driver ahead. It's a 2.2 mile long racetrack, guys. This is a 75 lap race. Like I said, this is similar to some road courses in terms of the turning and the braking zones, but obviously no one's run on a street course except for last year. So how can we prepare for that, and how are the drivers preparing for that? I think they're looking at last year's race a lot heading into this one, and I think that's going to be big for the drivers to try to catch up to SVG, because to me, with the more reps that he's had and being a part of that Trackhouse and colleague program this season, there's no reason why SVG is not going to go out and dominate this race once again. There are drivers that can beat him, but we'll get into that a little bit more in the odds breakdown. Let's stick with who else was fast in this race last year. SVG number 1, Kyle Larson number 2, not surprising there. You had Michael McDowell number 3, Tyler Reddick number 4, and Ty Gibbs number 5. Christopher Bell number 6, I think he was important to note. Him and Chris Buescher as well are in the 6 to 7 range. I could see one of those two drivers being strong this weekend, because Christopher Bell, him first, he is hot right now. He's one of the fastest drivers on the field, it looks like, every week since they won the Coca-Cola 600. And before then, they weren't really doing that well. And now they've really picked things up, and it seems like they've had a really good, second half to the regular season in this one. So Christopher Bell's a driver I have my eye on. He's at 38 laps and won the first 2 stages in this race last year. That's another thing that's important to note. He's also a driver that came out and said, if the track is, wet weather conditions once again this year, he'll love it, because he's the type of driver. We saw him at New Hampshire winning on the wet weather tires. So it looks like that dirt racing background, maybe a little sick conditions there, maybe play into his favor. But we'll see how that goes overall this weekend, and see, what the forecast is like as well. For Chris Buescher, I feel like he's due. And he's one of the best road course racers on the circuit. Now, how he can sort of bring that into the street race, that'll be left to be seen. Before we get into the odds breakdown, I want to go over the finishing results from this race last year. Now, obviously, a lot of factors came into play. It was shortened due to weather circumstances and the lighting on the track, as well as it was going into night based off the time the race was able to get back going and everything like that. So that was one thing to take into mind. Also, some guys stayed out for strategy and everything like that. But looking at the finishing results, let's see who was strong here in terms of the drivers that we did just mention with their overall speed rankings. Now, SVG was first. He won his first race ever for the Cup Series driver. Awesome. Justin Haley second, Chase Elliott third, Kyle Larson fourth, Kyle Busch fifth. I think that 3, 4, 5 there with all those Chevy drivers is important to note, because Toyotas have been really strong on the road courses this season. Now, Kyle Larson did win at Sonoma, so that's important to note as well. But I feel like it's been Truex, Hamlin, Reddick, Bell, even Ty Gibbs. I just listed almost all of the Toyota drivers there, because they've just been leading laps. They've been dominating, it seems, on these type of road courses that we've gone to. So to see the Chevys up front, that's important to note. Could they replicate that? Could it be a Chevy versus Toyota matchup here? And where does the first Ford come into play? Well, it's Austin Cindric in 6th. I'm not too surprised by that either, because Austin Cindric is a very good road course driver. Michael McDowell 7th, Joey Logano 8th. There you go. 3 Chevys, 3 Fords. Where's the Toyotas? 9th for Ty Gibbs and 10th for Chris Buescher. 11th for Denny Hamlin. William Byron 13th. And now it's pretty much everyone who was necessarily notable heading into this one. For Denny Hamlin, he sat on the pole in this race last year, and I think the winner of the pole is going to have a huge advantage in this one, not only for the pit stall, but also just track position, able to get a good jump on those restarts, heading into those tight corners. That could be a huge benefit for whoever, it is. And also, if there is an overtime, I mean, we saw 5 last weekend. Could we see even 1 or 2 for the street race in this one? If that does happen, I expect the driver who is, the pole sitter, if they can maintain that track position throughout the day, to really benefit from that position there. So Denny Hamlin finished 11th. Now, here's something that's crazy about Denny. I really feel like had he not gone into the wall a little bit in the first half or overshot some of the corners, he could have been a car that was in contention to win this race. I do believe that based off his practice times and him winning the pole in this one, being the fastest car there. So to me, I think Denny could be a driver to look out for in this one. Now let's get into the odds breakdown. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. Where does SVG stack up against the rest of the field there? And who is going to sort of put themselves in position for a big value play in this one? Well, SVG is the favorite at plus 425 on DraftKings specifically. I've saw 5-1, even 6-1 on some other books for SVG. So remember to price shop there as the favorites, and the odds will change from book to book. But here on DraftKings, the official sports book of NASCAR, he is the favorite at plus 425. Next up is going to be Tyler Reddick at plus 550. Now, this is a number that has gone down in the past couple of days. Tyler Reddick, I remember heading into this week, was 7-1 to win this race outright, and now he's going down to plus 550. That's a number where I still sort of like it for Reddick, but I would have liked the 7-1 a lot better. Christopher Bell at 6-1 as well. Kyle Larson plus 650. In that group of favorites, I mean, sheesh. I talked about them, a little bit there, or at least alluding to SVG continuing his dominance. Christopher Bell in second as well, or at least the top three there. I think that makes sense for him. He's been dominant on road courses, but he hasn't really won, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like he's been up there racing, leading laps, and you don't really notice him. You don't really recognize him as a driver dominating on road courses, at least from time to time. And I think he's a driver that could surprise a lot of people going into this one. And I don't want to be surprised. I don't want to be surprised by anyone this weekend. I want to be locked in to who's going to be fast. Chase Elliott at plus 800. That's good value for the driver who has, I think, the most road course wins out of current active NASCAR drivers. He's up there with Tyler Reddick and Kyle Larson as one of the best road course racers still on the circuit. So Chase Elliott plus 800 to win this one. Then we get into the guys with more value. Michael McDowell, 12-1. Truex, 12-1. Byron, 14-1 with Allmendinger at the same value. Chris Buescher, 16-1. Ty Gibbs, same. And now we go from those guys that have value, and to break those down a little bit, I think those are some of the road course specialists. I mean, we've seen William Byron winning at Watkins Glen and Coda. Chris Buescher has like a 12 race top 11 streak going on there. Ty Gibbs, we've seen how dominant he's been in the Xfinity series at road courses, as well as sometimes in the Cup series. He showed some flashes, especially at Coda specifically. AJ Allmendinger as well. He has like 8 road course victories out of all NASCAR series. Truex, we know. McDowell as well. So though that is a big group for me to look at, because not only do they have value, but they have the experience and the track record to go along with a driver we would want to bet on to win this race. Looking at more so underdogs now in this one in terms of their value. Daniel Suarez, 28-1. So is Chastain, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin is 30-1 to win this race. This is a driver every week when we talk about Denny Hamlin and the odds and Kyle Larson, they're top two. It's always Kyle Larson 4-1, Denny Hamlin 5-1 to win outright any given week. So for me to see 30-1 for Denny Hamlin to win this race outright, I mean, this is a number that to me seems like it has to go down no matter what. If I'm watching this video and tuning into the show now, if I'm you guys, I'm probably betting on Denny Hamlin right now earlier in the week, and he may be the only driver I touch. And the reason is he won the pole last season. I just talked about how important track position is going to be at this track and at this street course, and being able to gain an advantage over other drivers. He did that last year. I'm not saying he's going to go out and win the pole again, but if he does qualify inside the top 5, even inside the top 10, Denny Hamlin's going to go from plus 3,000, plus 1,000, 10-1. So to me, Denny Hamlin, that's a driver I'd probably lock in right now just to be able to capitalize on the value that is on the board right now for him. I'm not saying he's going to go out and win the race. I'm not saying he's beating SVG, Tyler Reddick, or Christopher Bell, or Kyle Larson. But I am saying Denny Hamlin should not be 30-1. He finished 11th in this race last year. He had some troubles, but he was the leader in a street course race that they didn't have that much, practice on, or didn't have, that much experience with the wet weather tires. And he was the first car to go out there, and he ended up hitting the wall and overdriving the corners and everything like that. So to me, Denny Hamlin 30-1 is a driver that I'll be betting on now before practice and qualifying. And I expect that number to change kind of drastically if he does qualify where he did last year, or at least somewhere in that range of the top 10. Other drivers that are underdogs in this one: Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Austin Cindric. Those drivers are ranging from 35-1 to 40-1. And then you get into the long shots in this one. Alex Bowman, 70-1. Briscoe, 80-1. Justin Haley is a driver I should mention because he's 80-1 and he finished second in this race last year. So if you're looking for any long shots in this one, that's a driver that can provide it for you. And same thing with Joey Hand. I mean, 90-1 in this one for him to win. We saw SVG open up last year at 60-1 because it was first ever NASCAR start. Now, Joey Hand has some experience. I believe he won one of the iRacing tournaments or league invitationals when they're racing that during COVID at the Chicago Street Course. So to me, I don't know, maybe he'll be good here in person. That's really the thing, which we don't know, and that's why his value is so high. But I would keep an eye on Justin Haley, Joey Hand, and Denny Hamlin for drivers that have tremendous value right now that could potentially go down. Now we broke down the odds. Time to take a look at some of the outright winners who I'll be picking to win this race this weekend. Now, first off, the main thing I want to note in my strategy heading into this one was I alluded to the drivers like Denny Hamlin, Joey Hand that have major value that could potentially be cut in half or more, like we saw with SVG last season. I mean, SVG went into the race and his value opened up at 60-1. He was then cut down to 33-1, and then even more when he qualified inside the top three, I believe to 8-1 for him to win the race because everyone was seeing how fast his car was. So my main thought process heading into this weekend, with it only being the second time we'll be racing here, is just to analyze and see who's fast in practice and qualifying. Unless it's a driver with major value, like Denny Hamlin, or if you want to take a gamble on Joey Hand and being a SVG type of driver, I would just wait. SVG at plus 425, I don't see that number going down much more. If he fastest in practice, fastest in qualifying, we could then see maybe plus 350. But that's a reassurance that I'll gladly take if I'm going to be betting on him this weekend, which I am. But at plus 425 and plus 350, in analyzing the odds each to week and seeing, how they've gone down or up due to driver's speed heading into that weekend, I don't think any of these drivers that are inside the top 5 here really provide us with that much value in terms of them being the favorites. And I think we can see them performing well and knowing then we do want to bet on them, and it provides a little bit of insurance, reassurance, however you want to put it, after practice and qualifying. So I think that's the way I'm sort of strategizing my weekend in this one, seeing and analyzing practice and qualifying, and basing the guys who I think that I'm going to tell you who are going to win this race out right now, see how they do after then, and make any adjustments if necessary. So first to start off, SVG. I talked about him at length already on, but at plus 425 for a winner, I know those odds are short, but I still think he can do it. I mean, he's only getting better in the NASCAR equipment we've seen him racing in, and I don't know. I just feel like with how much he's dominated this race last year and him having more experience in this Cup car, it's only going to be a benefit to him. The drivers in the field that are pros and the best in the business had to catch up to him last year. And although they might have, been able to gain some experience, well, so is SVG. So I still think there's a little bit of gap in talent at street courses for these drivers going up against a driver like Shane Van Gisbergen. So he's going to be my first pick to win this one outright. Next up is going to be Christopher Bell. I know that's another favorite, but in seeing him lead 38 laps in this race last year, win both stages, to me, that's a driver that I'd want on my radar at least, especially with how hot he's been. I mean, he looked to be the fastest car last week at Nashville. The week before that at New Hampshire. Almost every race weekend since he won, or what could have won, at Gateway, he was in position to do so, had an engine issue. Ryan Blaney looked like he was going to do it, and then Austin Cindric pulled that one out. So to me, Christopher Bell has been hot. I think he's on a streak right now that I just can't ignore. He'll be the second driver. I bet on to win this one outright. I think regardless of his qualifying efforts, but I'm still going to wait, like I mentioned before. Now, in terms of other drivers that really catch my eye, Larson's one of them that we cannot ignore. Chase Elliott, Michael McDowell, Martin Truex Jr., William Byron, all really strong road course racers. But how about Tyler Reddick? He's a driver where, to me, whenever he could win, hear me out on this one, whenever Tyler Reddick is in position to win a race and he doesn't get the job done, like we saw at Texas, he then showed speed the very next week at Talladega and won that race. Now, I know Talladega not comparable to this at all, but to me, that's just the type of mindset I'm looking for and trends that I'm seeing out of him. He's going to come in aggressive in this one, and I think him and that full send mentality that he mentioned, earlier this weekend on Denny Hamlin's show, I think that's going to benefit him in this one and how he raced there last year. Tyler Reddick's another driver I'll be betting on at plus 550. I'd like to see that 7-1 number. If you guys could find that, that would be something I would bet on earlier in the week because I think that could go down, but I won't be touching the plus 550 until after practice and qualifying to bet on him there. Now, next up for a fourth driver, let's get someone with a little bit more of a long shot or underdog odds in this one. Honestly, right now, I'm leaning towards a driver in Denny Hamlin at plus 3,000 to potentially provide us with some value in this one. I like him. I like Kyle Busch to have a chance. I like Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. Those are all drivers I'm thinking of right now. Tune in to my social media accounts at Tino, Pattigno, to really understand some of the changes that may happen, some of the adjustments that could be made when it comes to my official picks before race day. But those first three drivers are probably going to be locked in, barring any drastic changes. And then the fourth one, right now, I'll say it's Denny, just based off the value. But I also like Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson to throw another Chevy or a different type of manufacturer in there to win this one outright. Now, for some prop bets, there's a few out there that I like right now. This is another example of waiting until after practice and qualifying to really be sure that we can execute on this value and the drivers that we know are going to be fast. But some of them that I could feel like I could predict early on here would be Daniel Suarez for a top 5 at plus 360. I think that's good value for a driver in Daniel who not only has a win already this year, but has been strong on road courses throughout his entire NASCAR career, getting his first win at Sonoma there. So to me, I think he can be strong on this street course and be able to put things together there. Now, next up would be Michael McDowell for a top 5 at plus 155. McDowell's a driver that I think we need to keep in mind in this one. I was a little bit surprised at his performance there last year. I thought he would be a little bit more dominant than the car ended up being. But to me, I think he has a good shot. I mean, he finished 7th in that race last year also. So even with, me not really seeing him lead that many laps or anything like that, I still think at plus 155 for a driver who finished 7th in this race last year, I think Michael McDowell could be in a good spot to get another top 5 in this one, or to get a top 5 overall. So that could be, your props there for top 3s and top 5s. In terms of, that's where I'm thinking of not really touching any top 3s. I don't think there's any value there right now. For top 5s, those are the 2 drivers I'm going with. And for top 10s, I got 3 for you here. Kyle Busch for a top 10 finish at plus 105. Crazy that we're seeing this plus money for Kyle Busch to get a top 10 finish, as I mentioned last weekend as well. But to me, I think this just makes sense. I mean, he's been so close to just finishing a race and really managing his day. He's been doing better, and the car has been there. They've just been getting taken out by bad luck. So I think the streak will have to end at some point. You give me plus money, plus 105 for Kyle Busch to get a top 10 as he finished 5th in this race last year. I'm going to take that. Joey Logano, who will be racing in the Xfinity Series race, finished 8th in this race last year. So to me, for Joey Logano to get back-to-back top 10s, we know how good he is on new racetracks. Plus 145, I like that for Joey Logano. And Joey Hand at plus 330 for a top 10 finish. I think that's worth the sprinkle just based off of what we've seen with SVG and other drivers coming over into the sport and seeing how they can compete in the Cup Series, and also just seeing, the experience he does have and how that can contribute to his speed this weekend at Chicago Street Course. All right, now for my favorite plays to wrap things up here. It's a little bit hard to find one in this one just based off of how much I do like SVG, but how little his value is right now at plus 425. I think you can't go wrong with anything SVG related, even if you want to do a top 5 finish at minus 170. But we like to stay away from the minus value there in terms of NASCAR racing, just based off anything that can happen in each and every race. To me, I think right now I also want to say Denny Hamlin at plus 3,000 because that could give you a cash out option if he does end up starting towards the front and cutting that value in half. So to me, I think Denny Hamlin could be the favorite play. I do like Tyler Reddick when he is 7-1 to win this one. If you can get him for plus money for a top 5, that could be a strong play as well for Tyler Reddick. Keep an eye on Christopher Bell. I think anything Toyota related for those top 3 drivers there to finish inside the top 5 could be noted as a favorite play for me there. Like I said, a little bit tricky here to figure it out with the Chicago Street Course. So let me know what you think is your favorite play in this one. All right, guys, that'll do it for this edition of Through the Gears. Appreciate you guys watching, tuning in, following, liking, commenting if you did. And if you didn't yet, be sure to comment down below and let me know who you think is going to win the race this weekend. Like I said, excited for this race. It's going to be such a cool, thing to see on the TV there. I was in person last year, going to be watching off the screen this time around, and I'm excited, like whether you're in person to see it or at home watching it from the couch. I think it's going to be such a good event based off of what we had last year and all of the NASCAR racing action we've seen this season. With this season being as good as it has been, I'm excited to see what's in store. So let me know what you guys think and about, your thoughts on the Chicago Street Race. Let me know who you think is going to win this race. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to stay tuned in to the Front Stretch Podcast Network as we follow along with everything from the Stock Car Scoop that comes out after every race weekend, after every race, after every Sunday, after every finish. They give you guys the best insights and behind-the-scenes knowledge that you need to know after each and every week. So be sure to stay tuned in there, and I'll see you guys next week as we go through the gears.